Hey there, Taylor Elwood here with Magical Experiments, and I am welcoming to the show this morning Zach West. Zach, please introduce yourself and tell us who you are.
I am Zach West. I'm a musician, mainly a music educator, and a Deja Vu designer. And pretty much, I spend my life trying to help help my community sort of heal and develop through music and magic.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the show. Glad to have you here. And, today what I thought I would talk about was creating unique systems of magic because that was kind of how we started talking a little bit. I posed a question, or I think I shared something on my Substack about systems of magic, and you were the only one who responded about a unique system of magic that you developed. So, tell us a little bit about your magical background, first of all. Like, how long do you practice magic? What would you traditionally say you were familiar with before you started developing your own system of magic?
So it all started with Robert Anton Wilson. Um,
Mhm.
a friend of mine gave me Illuminatus, and then shortly after that led me Prometheus Rising, which sent me to Antro Ali and Peter J. Carroll. And once I got to Peter J. Carroll, I was like hooked. His chaos magic in general was really what I gravitated towards. I read a lot of Crowley because of Robert Anton Wilson, but though it was interesting and I loved to hear Robert Anton Wilson talk about Crowley, I wasn't really interested. I went to a few Gnostic masses here in Denver, and it was fun, but I wasn't too into it. But Peter J. Carroll, I just soaked up like a sponge. I mean, I think I bought like every one of his books that I could get my hands on. Also got into Phil Hine and things by Grant Morrison. And so I just took the chaos magic thing and ran with it. I didn't have many people in my local community who were into a whole lot of like what it would be called traditional magic or even using the word magic. Um, and so I was always teaching music, and I really found a parallel between learning music and learning magic, and that music, it could be a really amazing tool for working. And so I sort of married the two of those things together and made up my own system that I call Deja Vu by Design.
Okay. So before we get into that system, I want to talk a little bit about something you touched on, which I think is really important, and that's being able to draw upon quote unquote non-occult disciplines, although one could argue that music has its own esotericism. But the idea really that, there are, what I see happen with a lot of people who practice magic is they kind of get pigeonholed into magic itself. Like they'll read tons of books, tons of grimoires, tons of books about magic, but they won't necessarily show an interest in anything else. Um, and I think that that is actually a very myopic approach to magical work. Um, being what some might call a polymath, myself, I've always been interested in a variety of different disciplines and practices. And the question that I've always kind of asked myself is, how is it that I could take a non-occult system or discipline and apply it to magic? So, like, for example, architectural design, how could I take architectural design and apply that to magic? Now, I'm not an architecture, I don't like have a degree in architecture, but I've studied some books, read some books and kind of studied some things and applied it toward the way I design my space. So it definitely has played a role in the way that I think of things. So I think that for anyone who's watching this, one takeaway, and I mean, this is a great example, like in regards to your music, is be willing to explore and step outside of what you typically think of magic and occultism, because there can be a lot of really interesting disciplines out there that aren't overtly occult, but nonetheless have something very essential to add to magical work. Now, I see we have a few people who've joined us live. And so for those people who joined us live, welcome. And if you have questions or comments, feel free to drop those below. And I'll start out here with a question for all of you who are there, and then we'll get back to the interview itself. The question in this case would be, what are some non-occult disciplines that you study already in your lives that you think you might be able to apply to the magic that you work? So if any of you can think of that, feel free to drop those below, and we'll both look at that together. In the meantime, why don't you tell us a bit about your system of magic, Deja Vu? It sounded really intriguing. I was a FaceTime magician myself, so I always find it interesting to play with face and time.
Yeah, so there was a time like maybe around 2010, I just got really obsessed with the phenomena deja vu. I can't even remember why, but I do that. I sort of get obsessed with things and try to like unpack as much as I possibly can. And so deja vu just seemed I've had many experiences of deja vu. And it seems so close to like what might be called like psychic phenomena, precognition, that there was something that drew me to it. And so then, as I was also reading Peter J. Carroll's work, he talks about an imaginative link. He has this really cool, I think he calls it the pyramid of pataphysics or something like that. Anyway, paraphysics. He says that there's like four things: belief, link. I think he calls it subliminalization and gnosis. And so link is almost to me one of the most important things, and this has to do with visualization. But what I kind of stumbled upon in my own thoughts was that if you if you do some sort of magical working for a result and you do it well, the result should feel like a moment of deja vu. But rather than a happenstance like this, I feel like this has happened before. It's more like happened chance where you're like, this is so close to that visualized link that I did on purpose that I have to think that I had some sort of influence on the current collapsing of the state vector that I'm now witnessing. And it's a visceral feeling that is amazing. It can be as innocuous as a parking spot, but just the feeling of like virtual reality simulation, like this is so close to what I visualized, a week, a month, a year ago, that I have to feel like I influenced this to happen. And so I just got way into that. I also like the fact that you don't even have to have a magical background or be into quote unquote magic in order to use this system. And I honestly work a lot with children. I have two kids of my own, and we do this work with board games, because every board game has like that element to chance. And so you're kind of either encoding or decoding, whether it's a dice roll or card flip or spinner, and you're influencing future past selves via the imagination.
Um, First of all, awesome explanation. We're going to come back to that a bit. Second, we've had a few more people join, so welcome. If any of you have questions or comments as you're listening, feel free to drop those in. And a question that I posed to the other people out there is, what's an example of a non-occult discipline that you're interested in that you would like to apply to your magic? Feel free to share that in here if you want. That's our question for the audience. First of all, I get it as far as getting obsessed with an interest, because I'm the same way. Like if there's something that really interests me, I will do a deep dive. I actually had a friend of mine comment recently because I've been doing like a bunch of workshops and classes around men's work. Just because that's one of the things that I do, in my life professionally. But he said, he's like, I was talking to my wife the other day, and he said, I have a feeling that Taylor just does deep dives on these kinds of things when he does this, and I'm like, yeah, that's right. So I think there's something important to be said for having an element of obsession, if you will, about your interest and where they vector in. And I mean, it even kind of speaks to the point that I made earlier, where some people get really obsessed with magic. I get it. I mean, I did that. There was a period of time where that was all I was reading was books on magic, and then I branched outward. 'Cause I'm like, there's got to be more here, and I'm just an insatiably curious person. I find the concept of deja vu to be a really interesting and fascinating one because I applied something similar myself, and I think that there is something to say. There's something to say about that happen chance, about kind of playing with that idea that okay, like this is already happening, and it's kind of a similar way to how I play with results, where it's like, well, no, this has already been written in, it's already happened.
Mm.
We're just happening. We're just consciously coming to awareness of it and manifesting it now, which is a really powerful way to approach it. One thing I'm curious about is how do you integrate your music into the system of deja vu? What does that look like?
So just to go back to the four process, it's the symbol. So
Hmm.
so if you think about like you want a result to happen, you believe that it's possible, you believe in your agency. That's first. Then you spend some time creating a virtual rendering in your imagination of the result being happening. Then you use a symbol to focus on, right? And so music to me was the best symbol. So I have ways of creating a melody that is a representation of this result that I want to happen. I have
Hmm.
ways of creating rhythms that also. And so the idea is then when you are playing said melody or rhythm and you're focused on it with one pointed concentration, it's just the melody is everything. It works similar to like a sigil would.
No, okay, that makes sense, and it's interesting because I think a lot of times people think of don't necessarily think of music as the symbol, but then like there's been over the years, I've there's been a couple of articles that I've read, for example, where somebody developed what they called an audio sigil, where again they basically were creating a melody or a sound, and then I mean, how many times do we get earworms, right, so to speak, where we're listening to a song and we just keep hearing that song over and over again. I
Hmm.
like to when that kind of thing happens, I like to apply some level of awareness and turn that the listening of that song or the hearing of that song in my mind into a magical working because it makes more sense. It's like, okay, now it has a purpose. It's not just something that my mind has got hooked on. Now I'm hooking my mind into it and I'm actually using it to call forth something. So I think that's a really awesome way to approach it, whether or not you genuinely make music yourself. Like, I mean, I'll play a mean harmonica on occasion, and I do have a drum that I play. But I mean, I'm not by any means a skilled musician. But I still can see how that could be played with by anyone, whether or not they have a ton of experience or background. And I'm assuming that that was one of the reasonings behind how you developed it.
Yeah. And if you think about it, like all words have rhythm. And so if you use like syllabic chanting, you don't have to be a musician to do that. What you can do is similar to like creating a sigil. You write down the statement of intent, and then you distill it. You break it down to a few words, and then those will mostly become like a rhythm if you just start cycling it. Like an example that is non magical would just be like you ask a kid what their favorite color is and what their favorite animal is, and they say purple tarantula, and you say purple tarantula, purple tarantula, purple. Then you have that rhythm. And if you just play that rhythm like body percussion for like a half an hour, whatever that rhythm represents, probability permitting, will then be sort of pushed out into space time and hopefully come to you as a moment of deja vu by design.
Yeah, really. Yeah, that's a great example right there of adding a level of thematic embodiment to the action as well. And this is, I think, like the really key point with any magical system is that we can develop a magical system using a variety of things. It doesn't have to be an intellectual exercise. I think a lot of times what might keep people from doing that. Um, Again, I see we have a couple more people who've joined us, so welcome to the live stream here. If you have any questions or comments about how to develop unique systems of magic, feel free to drop those in here. We're talking a bit about the Deja Vu system that Zach has developed. Um, Zach, when you were first developing this system, what was your thought process about the mechanics of it going into it? Like, one thing that I like that you mentioned earlier is that like I designed it ultimately so that it could be done whether or not the person practiced magic, and I think that's huge because it sounds like to begin, like I can totally see doing the purple tarantula and being able to pull that off, whether or not you know any magic, especially if you're linking it to some very simple yet profound principles as to how magic works, like visualization and things like that.
Yeah, wouldn't it be funny if one of us or one of the listeners ends up seeing a purple tarantula sometime? It'll seem like synchronicity. Um,
It'll be deja vu.
yep, right. So I always liked to sort of, not that I mind the word, but take the word magic out of it so that it's accessible to more people, I think is and like I was saying that I do work with kids and I'm a music teacher, and so all my students, I mean, none of them are like we would be into magic, right? But I feel like we all have the ability to link to future past selves via the imagination, and that you can do a lot of not only healing, but what would be called like re-imprinting, using those type of techniques. So I also got really into Robert Anton Wilson and Timothy Leary's 8 circuit model, and I because music is my main obsession, I took that and made that musical. And so if you would think about like the circuit 5 through 8, those would also be ways that you could use music to sort of influence your life in more of like a what would be a magical way.
That's great. And yeah, I mean there's something really potent about being able to present a system to people where the word where we don't necessarily have to make it overtly magical in order to make it work. I'll admit I don't know off the top of my head if I could do that with all of the systems that I've developed over the years, and I've developed a few, but a lot of what I've done has still been made very approachable because it is kind of on a similar idea of how do we take what's around us and integrate it into the magic in a manner in a way that actually makes sense so that somebody could do something with it. Like if I take a piece of chalk, for example, and sketch out a drawing, that drawing could, in and of itself, be a magical working, especially if I can embody that through the act of drawing and create a link between the creativity. I mean, that it can be as simple as that.
Hmm.
But I think a lot of times what I find that people do is they get caught up in the needless complexity. And so I'll define that very briefly as needless complexity being that you do things that you don't fully understand because you open up a spell book, for example, or grimoire, and it's like, well, do these steps. And you're like, okay, I guess I have to do those steps, but I don't fully understand it. And the explanation that's been offered isn't a good one. Well, I would say strip out the needless complexity. If you don't understand something, don't do it until you actually understand it. But get down and look at it from a minimalist perspective. What is the minimum that I need in order to accomplish this?
Mm, mm,
And if I can do that, then I have something that's workable right there. I can add complexity in once I understand it and if I find that it enhances what I'm doing, but I don't need to make it more complex.
hmm.
So, like in my case, like I have some magical tools that I use, and I'll use them for very specific purposes. But a lot of times, I always look at it from the perspective of, is this tool something I absolutely need, or is this something that I want? What's its purpose and function, and does it add to the magic in an elegant way, or is it just needless complexity getting in the way?
Hmm. Yeah, I feel that for sure. And that's why I like the simplicity of Peter Carroll's work and the four, the belief, the link, the symbol, and the gnosis is that to me, that's one of the most simple ways to think about it. And so something like, like the Gnostic Mass or some really more sort of ceremonial thing, I feel like it's just a really elaborate way to uh do the symbol part. Like they take the symbol part and it's just super elaborate and they just like almost like a third circuit explosion where they just have lots of words, and lots of like this, but really all they're doing is they're just creating a symbol for a result. And if the result isn't really that well defined, then it can be enjoyable. And I would never want to take that away from anybody because Gnostic Mass can be very enjoyable. Lots of magical ceremonies, Golden Dawn type work can be very enjoyable and I think can be mystical and can help you with that religious instinct that I think Carl Jung talks about, right? Like we do have an instinct for religion. And so that was what I found in like Crowley, Golden Dawn, but who was really cool about explaining simplicity, I think, and is still in that world is Lon Milo Duquette. I don't know if you've read any of his work. But he gets really simple. I think he has a book called My Life with Spirits. And he has some great examples, some super good stories of, yeah, having to be simple because he only has so many resources, you know, and having to break it down. And then when things work or don't work, it's a way to reevaluate, like to rework your techniques. All right, well, this didn't work, so what do I got to do to change it? And my personality just fit more with the chaos magic just because it was simple. And honestly, I feel like if I had a lot of friends in my area who were more into the ceremonial thing, I probably would have gone there. It just happened that I'm like a lone island in my area and I don't know anybody who's into any of this, so I kind of had to make it more like user friendly for everybody just because I don't know any people around me who are into that stuff.
Well, like I started out as a solo myself. I mean, and this is a long, long time ago in rural Pennsylvania, and and I kind of had to keep it to myself too because of living in rural Pennsylvania, right? And so it's like it wasn't necessarily a good idea to be adverting that you're practicing magic, but it is interesting because sometimes that is the case. Like, and I remember like starting out and kind of reading books and trying stuff out, trying it out as best I could with what I had, and a large part of it was also like I was a teenager. I didn't have a lot of money to drop on elaborate ritual or ceremonial tools.
Mm.
And so I think, being able to look at it from the perspective of, well, here's what I can do and I've got the gist of this and I can make it work was more important than doing it exactly as described. And I think a lot of times what I see in magic books is what I'll call a prescriptive model, where it's kind of like you have to do it this way. Well, not really. It should be descriptive, and that's the way that I look at it. Like, let's keep it descriptive.
I don't know, is that me or you? Is that me or you? Something happened. My internet says it's